Dear learners, Namaste and welcome back to Middle Class University. I'm your host Abhijit. In this video, we are going to learn about the characteristics of infrastructure, benefits, returns, and external effects of the infrastructure, role of governments in managing and maintaining the infrastructure, and then in the end, conclusion. So let us move on to the characteristics of infrastructure. So the first characteristic of infrastructure is high initial cost but lower average costs over the time. We know any infrastructure project like roadways and railways need a lot of money upfront, but over a long period of time, that is 8 years, 10 years, 12 years, as they get used more, the cost per unit. So when we consider the highway or the road infrastructure, there the cost per unit becomes cost per vehicle, and when we consider what we call as train or metro, there we call this cost per unit as the cost per passenger on the train. It goes down. So all these things happen in the course of time. So once infrastructure is built, it makes sense for a single organization to handle it. Economies of scale and scope. In this, let us consider the example of power sector. So uh, if one company is handling the power sector, it can produce, transmit, and distribute electricity more efficiently than multiple companies doing multiple tasks like production, transmission, and distribution. If one company can produce the electricity, it can actually transmit and distribute electricity. It is more profitable in that case. It is not profitable if a separate company produce the electricity and that electricity is transmitted by a separate company, another company, and distribution is done by another company. So this is not profitable. So in this case, what happens is that when one organization can save cost by doing everything, we call it natural monopoly. So what is natural monopoly? That is a single company performing multiple tasks. But since monopoly could misuse their control, if one company got control over everything, then they can also misuse the monopoly. So in this case, they are often regulated by the government. So now let us learn what is the advantage of this, natural monopoly, that is scope for cost reductions through single management. So as I mentioned earlier, the example of electricity, when one organization manages the whole process, that is electricity generation, transmission, and distribution, it can reduce cost by managing everything under one system. This requires regulation to ensure fair pricing and service to users. As I mentioned earlier, that government controls everything if natural monopoly is there. Now let us learn about benefits, returns, and external effects with respect to the infrastructure. So in this case, let me give you a tabular format in which there are four types of financial and economic returns variation. And in this case, each and every example has different types of benefits, different types of returns, and different types of external effects. So the first example here is high financial and economic returns. The infrastructure with high financial and economic returns. The perfect example for this is the telecommunication industry. We know that the telecom projects have both financial and economic benefits. That is, it can give business profits as well as it can also benefit the society, making them a good investment option. Hence, this comes under high financial and economic returns. And our second example is low financial and economic returns. In this case, I have added the example of space travel. We can also add the examples of other future technologies like Hyperloop. In this case, the projects like Hyperloop or space-based travel, they are still new and they are very costly. And it is not certain, the benefits are not certain. So both financial and economic benefits are low for now. We don't know in future the space travel might be profitable if they find out anything in the outer space which is beneficial in both economic and financial terms on Earth. It might be high financial and economic return based infrastructure, but as for now it is low financial and economic returns type of infrastructure. And then the third category is high economic but low financial returns. In this case, I have given the example of metro transportation. Now you might ask me the question that how metro transportation comes under high economic but low financial returns. You know, the metro transportation have a lot of advantages like less pollution, safer travel, and improved property values surrounding the metro construction areas and all of that. But the metro infrastructure itself cannot make a lot of money directly from tickets. Hence, we need external funding either from the government or a private agency, to run the metro profitably. Our fourth category is high financial but low economic returns. In this case, I have added the example of nuclear power plants. We know that the nuclear power plants can be hugely profitable. Like nuclear energy is a clean energy and we can make a lot of profits by selling the electricity as well. But there is a catch over here. We know that the extremities of an explosion or the accident of a nuclear power plant is so high that it cannot benefit the society during those externalities. It can lead to loss of lives, also the genetic mutation problem, everything is there. So we cannot ignore all these things. Hence, it comes under high financial but low economic return since the benefits is overpowered by the extremities of a nuclear power plant accident. So this was all about benefits, returns, and external effects. Let us now learn about the role of governments in the case of infrastructure. So the first role of government is managing the monopolies. So we learnt in the earlier slides that when one company handles multiple functions in an infrastructure, it leads to a natural monopoly. And when natural monopoly is there, we should make sure that the companies do not misuse it. Hence, the government should intervene in that case and regulate the policies. So that is this point, that is managing the natural monopolies. So moving on to the next point, that is using the national resources wisely. So in the case of infrastructure, the usage of national resources like land, the natural resources like water and other, we can also see a massive deforestation which can take place during the construction of infrastructure. So the government should make sure that everything takes place in a sustainable manner. That is, everything takes place uh, with an optimization technique so that nothing goes wasted and the environment is not harmed. So this was about using the national resources wisely. So the next point is handling the external effects. So when an infrastructure is built, there are both positive and negative impact with respect to that infrastructure to a society. So what are the positive effects with respect to an infrastructure is that it can create job for many people. What is the negative impact of an infrastructure is that it can cause pollution, and these things can be better addressed by the government instead of a private entity. If government address these things due to the trust obtained by the government from the people, it would be better off when it is explained and convinced by the governments instead of a private entity. So there's a curious thing in India. Infrastructure has traditionally been managed by the public sector due to historical factors and public trust. Even in the pre-independence era, the British government used to handle and construct the infrastructure in India. So moving on to the next slide, that is, there are some challenges with this model. That is, even though government can handle, build, construct and manage the infrastructure, but there are a lot of flaws in this model as well. So the first flaw is the management effectiveness. So we have observed, that is, the general public observes the issues with the quality and operations of the infrastructures. We can see a lot of examples. That is, we can see an example of poorly maintained roads in our country, and congested ports in our country. And in some cases, we can also see the absence of the right infrastructure for a particular area. So these all comes under the management effectiveness. So moving on to the second point, that is the funding. We know that the government budgets are large, but the allocation of the budget for the infrastructure may not be, in that huge number. So funding always matters. The challenge with respect to this model is that the funding will not always reach the particular point for the construction of infrastructure or maintaining the infrastructure. So the second point is funding. So the next point, which is a challenge for this model, is the incentives. So the incentives given to the people who run the infrastructure should be fair enough. But what happens in India is the case that the government workers may lack incentives to improve or innovate the infrastructure projects. The payment is very less and they do not show the interest in innovating the infrastructure, or they don't show the interest in maintaining the infrastructure with the same quality if they are given the incentives, if they are given the better incentives. So uh, what conclusion can we take from this PowerPoint presentation is that due to these challenges, there were attempts to discover other models to manage infrastructure more effectively. So we saw that only if government solely manages the infrastructure, there are a lot of flaws, there are a lot of disadvantages with respect to management, incentive, and even funding. So in this case, we need another model to manage infrastructure more effectively. So this model can involve private sector participation. So this was all about today's video. Uh, in the last slide, I explained that the private sector intervention should be there. So in the next video, I will be explaining more about public-private partnership and many more topics to come. So thank you. Please like my video and subscribe to my channel and press the bell icon so that you don't miss out on my videos. And I also have a newsletter on LinkedIn. So please read that as well. Thank you.